Hello and welcome. Tonight, for the first time in 6 years, students of Government Secondary School Chibok sit for the West African Secondary School Certificate Examinations 6 years after the infamous abduction of over 270 girls from the school in April 2014. President Muhammadu Buhari says self-sufficiency plan of the federal government has prevented Nigeria from entering a food crisis as faced by other nations following the COVID-19 pandemic. Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency warns of potential food crisis as flood continues to ravage farming communities across the country. And tech firm Microsoft warns that Russian group that hacked the 2016 Democratic campaign is again involved in cyber attacks, attempting to spy on the US 2020 presidential election. Plus business, sports, and later from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, Minister of State for Petroleum, Timipre Silva, says Nigeria will save 1 trillion naira annually from oil sector deregulation following removal of petrol subsidy by the federal government.
On sports news tonight, four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel will remain in Formula One after signing a deal to join Aston Martin from next season.
And for the first time in 6 years, final year students of Government Secondary School in Chibok, Borno State have written their WAEC examination. The Nigerian Army says it provided the required security for students and families while the examinations lasted. Since the abduction of over 270 schoolgirls by Boko Haram insurgents on April the 14th, 2014, the school has remained shut until this session. Formerly an all-girls institution, it's now a mixed-sex school, having also admitted boys.
No one would have thought this will happen any soon. It's been 6 years since 246 secondary school girls were abducted from school. Fast forward to this year's WAEC examinations. These are footage of students taking part. 238 Chibok students, comprising 116 boys and 122 girls. Of course, this didn't just happen. Some special arrangement had to be put in place. The military says it has achieved a lot in offering protection for students and teachers in Borno State amidst the counterinsurgency war.
After the capture of Goza, the army had to integrate the teachers who were there taking refuge into teaching the children there in schools. We've been paying them since then, and we are still paying them.
A multi-agency team pushing for the agenda of education in the Northeast has been engaging with students and stakeholders in Borno State in the last 2 days. Their mandate is creation of awareness pursuant to the federal government's ratification of the Safe School Declaration for Protection of Education in Emergencies.
One of our points of disagreement is that we should not occupy school at all, and then tell them no, it's not possible. If we advance on armies all over the world, including US, if you don't have any facility on ground, when you land in operational area, the school, the places you are likely to use for storage and some other things are schools. And that's why the SSD, Safe School Declaration provision, provide for extraneous reasons. That except for extraneous reasons, and the occupation of military forces there should be short-lived. And I want to argue that we military will comply. It's for extraneous reasons that we occupy that place.
The Education in Emergency team is driving the conversation on the conduct and contributions of the military.
The education corps that is here is giving us a lot of support. And then sorry, I may not be using your terms, but the combatant team are protecting even the IDP camps in the deep field. That is something that we really appreciate.
The United Nations has declared September 9 as the International Day to protect education from attack. The federal government's ratification may well midwife protection and ownership of education in conflict situations.
From that scene of the infamous abduction to the nation's capital now, where police authorities have confirmed the kidnap of 10 persons today by Intungan Maje, a community on the border of Abuja and Niger State. The FCT Police Command says in a statement that at least 5 of the victims have been rescued after the police engaged their abductors in a gun battle. The police spokesperson said they received a distress call at about 1:30 p.m. and a joint team of police operatives from the Command's Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, Rapid Response Squad and Zuba Police Division responded swiftly. The statement adds that efforts are ongoing to rescue the remaining 5 victims still in the custody of the bandits, who reportedly escaped into Niger State through a nearby forest surrounded by rocky terrain. Meanwhile, military authorities are offering assurances that the internal security of the Federal Capital Territory and the entire country remains a major preoccupation of the military and other security agencies. The Coordinator of Defense Media Operations, Major General John Eneche, emphasized this during a briefing in which he outlined the recent successes recorded by security forces in various operations. He urges residents to go about their businesses undeterred.
On the 5th of September 2020, troops of Operation Safe Haven raided hideouts of suspected Sarasuka criminals at Yantifa, New Market, Terminus and Bauchi Road in Jos North local government area of Plateau State. Troops apprehended 20 Sarasuka suspects at the location, while 2 members of a syndicate specializing in the production of fake security agencies' identity cards were also apprehended. Currently, all the arrested suspects are being profiled, after which they will be handed over to the appropriate prosecuting agency for further action. In addition, on the 8th of September 2020, troops of Operation IM Akwatuma 3 killed a militia leader, Tewase Akwaza alias Ghana, during an encounter with troops around Boko in Benue State. Sequel to the security alert by a purported memorandum from the Nigerian Customs Service warning its staff on a possible attack on the FCT. The defense headquarters once again wish to reassure residents of the FCT and other adjoining states that the armed forces of Nigeria and other security agencies have been on red alert to combat crime and ensure effective surveillance of the FCT and other states of the country.
Excellent President.
Good afternoon. It's a unique history.
Away from security, President Muhammadu Buhari receiving the newly elected president of the African Development Bank, Mr. Akinwumi Adesina, at the State House in Abuja. Afterwards, President Buhari solicited Mr. Adesina's support towards fixing the infrastructure deficit in the country. He made the request while receiving in private audience the AFDB president, who recently won an unprecedented 100% votes from the bank's Board of Governors. President Buhari says he supported Mr. Adesina's second-term bid because he's proven to be a good Nigerian. In appreciation, Mr. Adesina said, "When I came in June, you received me and I shared my successes and the difficulties facing me. You listened and you said you will stand by me, and you did. You not only stood behind me, but also beside me. No greater honor for a man than for his commander-in-chief to be his supporter-in-chief and his defender-in-chief." Meanwhile, President Buhari's itinerary also included presiding over the National Food Security Council meeting at the State House in Abuja, where he noted that the federal government's self-sufficiency plan has prevented Nigeria from entering a food crisis following the COVID-19 pandemic. The president, who also chairs the council, recalled that despite the decline in GDP in the second quarter of 2020 by 6.1%, the agricultural sector continued to grow as a result of government's targeted policies. Our State House correspondent, Kayla Megwa, reports.
Nigeria currently ranks at number 93 out of 117 in the World Global Food Index. A disappointing score for a largely agrarian society. Agriculture alone accounts for over 40% of the employment in Nigeria. It's a sector in dire need of government support, considering it used to account for more than 70% of the country's GDP at independence. Now it contributes just over 20%. The Buhari administration in March of 2018 set up the National Food Security Council, specifically to ensure food security in the country. The president believes the council is delivering on its mandate.
In the last 5 years, we have recorded notable achievements despite the decline in GDP by 6.1% in second quarter of 2020. As a direct result of coronavirus, the agricultural sector continued to grow because of government's targeted agricultural policies. We have been blessed by God with 6 successive rainy seasons, ensuring good harvest since 2015. The nation thanks our farmers for rising to the occasion and answering a national call.
The council is also taking credit for the reduction in the cost of food over the months and wants Nigerians to expect high output this harvest season. Its deputy chairman, the governor of Kebbi State, Atiku Bagudu, says the country has achieved self-sufficiency in many crops.
Harvest has commenced in some parts of the country in respect of some crops, and because of that, the prices have begun to respond to harvest by beginning to come down. Maize was never on the importation ban list. What CBN did in order to support domestic maize production was to restrict the sale of foreign exchange for maize importation, and but maize is not a banned commodity yet.
President Buhari has instructed the central bank not to issue a kobo of the country's reserves for the importation of food items and fertilizer. He insists that the focus should be on empowering local producers and farmers. That way, the government will ensure food security while fixing the unemployment rate. From the State House in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
To the environment and the weather, as flooding continues to ravage farming communities across the country, the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency is warning that the nation faces a potential food crisis. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the Director General of the agency, Clement Inze, explains that more flooding is expected this month and in October. According to him, the highly vulnerable states are Kebbi, Niger, Kwara, Kogi, Anambra, Edo, Delta, Rivers, and Bayelsa State.
The major implication now is that Nigeria might be facing food scarcity when the agricultural lands have been overwhelmed, washed away. Each type of crop you plant, whether it is a millet, it is rice, is anything, they have certain amount of water they require for optimum production. But now when water comes and overruns them, stagnating for about a week, those crops oftentimes they will die off completely. So this has serious implication. The flood of this year has serious implication with regards to food security in Nigeria. So the information we have as of today is that the level of River Niger in Niamey, Niger Republic, is at about 7.01 meters. 7.01 meters. That's the height of the level of the River Niger in Niamey. Niamey is being taken as a reference point. Once such a height is coming there, it must come down to Nigeria. It takes a travel time of about 14 days, which means the devastation that we witnessed for about 2 weeks now in Kebbi, in Kwara, in Niger states, and then eventually Lokoja and other states. More is still on its way advancing down to Nigeria.
To legal matters now, and Nigeria has secured yet another victory in its case against Process and Industrial Development P&IG after the judge of an English High Court, Justice Ross Cranston, today ordered the company to make an interim payment of more than £1.5 million sterling to Nigeria. The payments, to be made within 21 days, covers legal costs incurred by Nigeria as part of the country's successful application for the extension of time to challenge the arbitration award and procedural hearing earlier in the year. The ruling has been confirmed to Channels Television by the spokesperson of the Attorney General of the Federation, Dr. Umar Gwandu. Today's hearing follows the court's ruling on September the 4th, allowing Nigeria to bring a fraud challenge against a $10 billion arbitration award obtained by P&ID well outside the normal time limits. Back home, in the hearing of the appeal filed by the Bayelsa State Governor, Doyediri, challenging nullification of his election, which is scheduled to begin on September the 14th. The date was fixed during today's proceedings, where some factional members of the Advanced Nigeria Democratic Party brought an application to be joined as parties in the appeal. Now, counsel to the ANDP, Kehinde Ogunwumiju, however, informed the court that a notice of preliminary objection challenging the competence of the application has been filed. Head of the three-man panel hearing the appeal, Justice Stephen Ada, ruled that parties will be allowed to respond to the application filed by factional members of the ANDP at the next date. Now to the Federal High Court in Abuja, which has been told how Malibu Oil and Gas Limited and 6 other companies charged with fraud in the oil prospecting lease 245 transaction allegedly violated the nation's money laundering laws. The allegation was made by Mr. Temitope Erinomo, who is a principal officer of the Special Control Unit Against Money Laundering in the Federal Ministry of Trade and Investment. He appeared in court as the first prosecution witness in the case of 67 counts of money laundering involving about $800 million instituted by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. After taking the testimony of the witness, the trial judge, Justice Inyang Eko, deferred his cross-examination by other defense lawyers to October the 27th. And now to some heartwarming news from the health sector, where the National Association of Resident Doctors, NARD, has suspended its nationwide industrial action. The president of NARD confirmed this to Channels Television in Abuja today. However, the doctor says the union will review the progress made in talks with the federal government in 2 weeks. The two sides held lengthy negotiations yesterday at the office of the Minister of Labour and Productivity, after which the NARD team promised that it will meet with its National Executive Council today with a view to calling off the strike. More on health, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has again warned states contemplating to reopen schools to do so with utmost caution, as 10% of the 176 cases reported in the last 24 hours comprise of children and adolescents. The task force also notes that 80% of the total cases in Nigeria are either asymptomatic or show very mild symptoms, which is why it insists on the use of non-pharmaceutical intervention such as face masks.
The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and some national commissioners are attending this briefing for the first time. The INEC officials are here to brief the task force about preparations for a safe conduct of the Edo and Ondo state governorship elections. But before he briefs the task force, the Minister of State for Health and the representative of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control highlight the dangers associated with the non-use of face masks, as well as the need to reopen schools cautiously.
In the last 24 hours, we recorded 176 positive cases out of 2,494 samples tested. 10% of the positive cases are children and adolescents, with more than half of them in the age bracket of 10 to 18 years. It is therefore pertinent at this point to renew the warning of the Presidential Task Force on the reopening of schools so as not to expose our children to the risk of infection.
In Nigeria, the age group with the highest cases of COVID are those between 31 and 40, and those are the active age group. But the age group with the highest mortality are 50 and above, and unfortunately, at least one person out of 10 of that age group might die. So when we ask that we take responsibility, it is beyond protecting ourselves, and it's also for us to protect our loved ones.
The Secretary to the Government of the Federation also speaks about the additional provision for hazard allowance for health workers and the safety protocols for international travelers.
I'm pleased to announce that Mr. President has graciously approved additional 8.9 billion naira for COVID-19 hazard allowance to all medical and health workers in the country.
The INEC chairman is then invited to brief the task force about how he plans to conduct elections in Edo and Ondo states amidst the pandemic.
Drawing from the broad policies, the Commission developed a 10-point voters' code of conduct targeted specifically at the voter. For instance, it is mandatory for every voter to wear the face mask or face covering, without which the voter will not be allowed to vote.
Nigeria has consistently recorded low cases of COVID-19 since the last 3 weeks. But the Presidential Task Force says the country is still far from flattening the curve of COVID-19.
Meanwhile, following an Executive Council decision, the Governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, has inaugurated an implementation committee to make recommendations on how to revamp some health facilities in the state. Some of the health institutions to be considered include the Professor Kelsey Harrison Hospital, Dental and Maxillofacial Hospital, and Ashes to Ashes Mortuary, all in Port Harcourt, the state capital. The committee, which will be chaired by the Deputy Governor, Dr. Ekpali Buhari, has 1 month to submit its report in order to guide the government on the needed upgrade.
Yesterday I heard from this report that we are using a porta cabin for dental, so it is very, very embarrassing. Very, very embarrassing. So now we have an opportunity. I don't even know why a state should have that and then give it out to private people, and then their students or the medical, the dentists cannot train, they cannot train their dentists. It's very, very bad. You know, so please, I don't want bureaucracy now. I want you to go into action and within 1 month, submit your report. The cost of each of these hospitals to renovate it and put back what the things are not there that you can say will take off. So I believe that all those who are members of this committee have the capacity to carry out this assignment as quickly as possible.
We are going to work within the time you have given us, the time frame of 1 month. If we have to stay a week, we will all stay a week and do it. Whatever legal issues we know that our legal team can take care of that. But meanwhile, we are going to put in place those things that will revitalize these areas, because we know how much health, education, social sectors are important to your drive for quality of life of Rivers State.
Staying in the health sector, but now to the southwest, the people of Saki and nearby towns in Okeogun, axis of Oyo State, have a new health facility to cater to their needs. The hospital was flagged off as an infectious disease center by the previous administration, but the uncompleted structure has now been remodeled and renamed the Saki Specialist Hospital to complement existing health facilities. While the upgrade was done, bearing in mind the COVID-19 pandemic, it's expected to also offer specialized services to different groups of people, especially the aged.
When the coronavirus broke out in Nigeria early in the year,
One of the highlights was how it drew attention to the poor state of health infrastructure across the country. Addressing this challenge, the Oyo State government is converting one of its 2 infectious disease centers to a specialist hospital. This, according to the governor, is to complement existing health facilities. This event at Shaki is the official commissioning of the remodeled and upgraded project abandoned by a previous administration. It now houses the state's 2nd infectious disease center. The facility is now converted as a Shaki Specialist Hospital.
When we took over office last year, our healthcare system was not in the best shape. At the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, we had to make tough decisions to leverage on the situation and accelerate our plans to address the dilapidating healthcare infrastructure in Oyo State.
Among other things, the facility is expected to cater to senior citizens.
This structure today is a security for our elderly time, for our good health, both now and into the future of our elderly life.
Governor Makinde sees this 100-bed facility as one of his legacy projects. He's promising to build 351 model primary health care centers across the state. This, to him, is to revolutionize the state health sector.
We've invested close to ₦500 million on this facility, and for equipment alone, we've invested over ₦250 million.
The upgraded hospital is equipped with a 10-bed intensive care unit with 2 gradient state-of-the-art mechanical ventilators, among other modern medical facilities. Bukola Oriowo, Channels Television News.
To judicial matters, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Tanko Mohammed, today administered the oath on 85 judges who will handle governorship election petition cases in Edo and Ondo states, as well as other by-elections across the country. Justice Mohammed, who performed the ceremony at the Supreme Court, asked the judges to conduct their affairs within the ambits of the law.
There's no doubt that temptations, tribulations, intimidations, and even blackmails may be unleashed on you. But as thoroughbred judicial officers, you must guide your loins to rise above all and do what will earn you accolades in the court of public opinions. There's no mountain too high to scale, and there is no goal too difficult to achieve as far as we have firmly resolved to attain higher heights in life.
From the judiciary to politics, endorsements continue to pour in for the PDP governorship candidate Godwin Obaseki as political parties rev up their campaigns ahead of the September 19th governorship election in Edo State. In separate events, the women's wing of the PDP and a group made up of clergymen drum up support for Governor Obaseki, who they say has the best credentials to move the state forward.
Franchise is live on stage with his latest hit, the PDP official campaign song, Edo Must Move Forward. Statewide campaign activities of the PDP women reach a crescendo in Oedo local government area. The wife of the party's governorship candidate, Mrs. Betsy Obaseki, leads the way. she's very confident of a PDP victory at the polls.
God day stand gidigan for this election matter. He now talk and say this election na im matter. He say Obaseki relax, say na my matter, na so God Almighty talk. Osalobua, we make heaven and earth. We get all power. He say this election in hand there on top. Make we see the man or in Juju, we won't stand before Osalobua, we create all.
The women's rally canters to a stop at the government house. Governor Godwin Obaseki is full of gratitude to the team.
All the promises we have made, we haven't just set them because we want to win elections. We've set them because we mean them. Yes. And we have started working on all the promises we've made. No doubt. As you went round, I'm sure you would have noticed things which we may not have seen. Please let us know so that we can incorporate them in our planning. And by the grace of God, by the time we finish in 2024, Edo will not be.
There is more for Mr. Obaseki to be grateful for. Clergymen under the aegis of Kingdom-Minded Ministers Association seek divine intervention for his re-election into office for another 4 years.
And servants of God to endorse our choosing governor, ordained by God, commissioned by God, sent forth by God, to continue his work he has started, and to end up in 2024, not to end up in 2020.
The governorship election might be less than 2 weeks away, but the PDP says it's hopeful of many more endorsements.
It shall not stand!
Meanwhile, the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Pastor Osage Ezeyamu, is seeking a partnership with traders at the Uwelu Spare Parts Market in Benin City towards driving an effective public-private collaboration if he wins the September 19th governorship election. Pastor Ezeyamu made the appeal during the APC ward-to-ward campaign rally in Ego local government area of the state. The APC candidate also promised to initiate labor-friendly policies if elected.
The day's campaign begins from the Secretariat of the Nigeria Labour Congress in Benin City, the Edo State capital, where the former APC National Chairman Adams Oshiomhole leads his party's governorship candidate, Pastor Osage Ezeyamu, to engage with the workers.
Today, I have come to formally inform you. I am running for governor under the platform of the APC. I ask for your support. I ask for your prayers. Like the chairman of TUC said, we have not done. Yes. We have heard. Anybody above 80 years, nobody to be cardioid. This is the best to go for or not to go for. These are people to do the lead and the right. I want to encourage you to vote wisely.
The meeting with organized labor is a brief one. At the end, the APC team departs to meet with the Bowo community leaders in Ego local government area.
It may be a simple agenda.
Dawn here, the team moves to Selu. Here, the APC governorship candidate, Pastor Osage Ezeyamu, assures the people of his commitment to address the needs in the area if elected into office.
We are going to see development for the local government. We will do roads. We will bring better lights. We will create employment. We will support our women. All this is by the grace of God. Will be able to do. I get too many friends for this place to fail now. And by the grace of God, I'm not going to fail now.
From Uselu, the rally continues to Uwelu Spare Parts Market, where Pastor Ezeyamu seeks the traders' support and mandate in order to actualize his dream of effective public-private partnership in the state. APC believes the coming days will provide more avenue for it to continue its engagement with those whose mandates will decide the winner in the upcoming election.
Meanwhile, ahead of elections in Ondo State, a fire incident has occurred, razing some facilities of the head office of the Independent National Electoral Commission in Akure, the state capital. The inferno, which started at about 7:30 p.m., reportedly gutted the container housing smart card readers before men of the fire service arrived on the scene to contain the blaze. Both the INEC National Commissioner, Festus Okoye, who is in Ondo in preparation for October 19th governorship election, as well as the Administrative Secretary, also rushed to the scene of the incident. Mr. Okoye says investigations into the cause of the fire will begin promptly. And now for business news, here's Teniola Shobowale.
Banking, so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks, Olumide. Welcome to Business News. The federal government has explained its decision to fully remove subsidy from petrol, saying the country stands to rake in over 1 trillion naira annually, which would be deployed to fund other critical sectors of the economy. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Temipre Silva, also revealed that with effect from October 2020, Nigerians can now convert cars using petroleum to gas, which he says will be cheaper. On the plan to roll out car conversion plants next month, the minister says the federal government is introducing an alternative fuel known as autogas in order to give the regulation a human face.
What we achieved last year, oil price was $60-something per barrel. This year, we have lost more than 60% of that value that we had last year. So we are not even talking in terms of $100 oil, which was the reality at the time of the previous administration. So at this time, where do we have the money to continue to subsidize? Subsidize a product that is not, at the end of the day, in the interest of the common man. Because the people who are taking advantage of the subsidy are not the common people. The people who are feeding fat from subsidy are not the common Nigerians. So we are bringing it to you, gentlemen. We are democratizing the process of pricing PMS. Instead of government sitting back and then some people coming on fixing the prices and some unscrupulous business people taking advantage of that situation. We cannot continue with that as a nation.
Over 41 million micro-businesses in the country are to benefit from the federal government intervention for the small and micro-medium sector as they contend with the shocks posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Two schemes, namely the MSME Survival Fund and the Payroll Support Scheme, which has a target of impacting 1.7 million entities, is being implemented by the government to ensure that businesses thrive in the country. The Minister of State, Industry, Trade and Investment, Ambassador Mariam Katugum, who made this known at a meeting in Abuja, explains that the sum of 60 and 15 billion naira respectively has been earmarked for both schemes, which is expected to immediately take off. Well, after 3 days of consistent downturn, the stock market made a sharp rebound at the close of today's trading session, following renewed interest by investors in bank shares, which had been the most affected by the profit-taking on the NSE. Ekaite Afia tells us more.
Thank you for joining us for the Stock Market Report. It's been quite an interesting trading session at the local stock market today, and that's because the benchmark indicators turned positive after a 3-day downturn following a strong 2.28% rebound from the banking sector. Now, the gains from the big 5 lenders and sub-mid banks, as well as support from the consumer goods sector and MTN Nigeria, largely contributed to the 0.38% recovery in the all-share index and the 50 billion naira in total market value. So this was expected by traders. They say most of the equities, bank stocks in particular, still have strong fundamentals despite the previous losses on their share prices. It's also a similar positive picture on the price table as market breadth ended with 22 gainers led by Eternal Oil against 12 losers, which were led by ABC Transport. However, looking at the activity chart, we can see that total volume and volume of shares traded today were lower by 13.2% and 42.7% each compared to the previous session, while Zenith Bank remains the main attraction for investors on the top trades list. Meanwhile, traders say they remain hopeful for more bargain hunting in Friday's session. That's all for the stock market report. I'm Akaite Afia.
And that's business news tonight. It's back to you, Olumide.
Microsoft says hackers with ties to Russia, China, and Iran are attempting to spy on people and groups involved with the U.S. 2020 presidential election. The tech firm says the Russian group which hacked the 2016 Democratic campaign is again involved in the cyber attacks. This time, both President Donald Trump and Democrat Joe Biden's campaigns are being targeted. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Greece has sent 3 ships to help thousands of refugees sleeping rough on the island of Lesbos after a fire destroyed their overcrowded camp. For a second night, families have slept on roads, in fields and car parks after fleeing Moira camp, where about 13,000 people had been living in squalor. Greek authorities have transferred more than 400 unaccompanied children and teenagers to the mainland, but many more people remain stuck on Lesbos without homes or shelter.
Everything is finished. I have 3 babies. I am also pregnant. Moria problem too much.
The US state of Oregon has been battling with record-breaking wildfires which have destroyed at least 5 towns. 3 deaths in Oregon have been blamed on wildfires, with another in neighboring Washington state. In California, 3 people have died and thousands have been forced from their homes. Fires have also been raging in 9 other western states.
We expect to see a great deal of loss as a result of these fires, both in terms of structures and in terms of human lives. It, as I mentioned earlier, could be the greatest loss in human lives and property due to wildfire in our state's history.
The US has revoked the visas of more than 1,000 Chinese students and researchers who were deemed to be a security risk.
The actions of China may be unabated.
The move follows a proclamation by President Donald Trump in May aimed at Chinese nationals suspected of having ties to the military. He said some had stolen data and intellectual property. Nearly 370,000 students from China enrolled at US universities between 2018 and 2019. China has accused the United States of political persecution and racial discrimination. Wildlife populations have fallen by more than 2/3 in less than 50 years. That's according to a major report by the conservation group World Wildlife Fund. The report has said this catastrophic decline shows no sign of slowing down and that nature is being destroyed by humans at a rate never seen before. It has recorded an average of 68% fall in more than 20,000 populations of mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles and fish since 1970. Shipping a coronavirus vaccine around the world will be the largest transport challenge ever. That's according to the airline industry. There is no COVID-19 vaccine yet, but the International Air Transport Association is already working with airlines, global health bodies and drug firms on a global airlift plan. It has said the equivalent of 8,000 Boeing 747s will be needed, as well as careful planning to ensure that planes respect requirements for transporting drugs, such as complying with a temperature range between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Denis Mukwege has been placed under the guard of United Nations security forces in the Democratic Republic of Congo after death threats against him. It comes after thousands of people in eastern Congo have protested in support of Mukwege after he announced he had been receiving death threats for speaking out over serious human rights violations. This is Dennis Mukwege's hometown, the site of a hospital where the doctor treats survivors of sexual violence, which is endemic in the region's conflicts. Unilever, the global conglomerate that owns the Tresemme beauty product label, has apologised for a controversial advert in South Africa that described black people's hair as damaged, dull, dry and frizzy. This comes as several leading South African retailers have removed Tresemme products from their shelves. Many who criticised the advert said it was particularly insensitive because of the historic issues around African hair in South Africa, such as the so-called pencil test, used to determine racial identity based on how easily a pencil passed through one's hair. In Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires, hundreds of police officers have been protesting for a salary increase, better working conditions and more protection amid the coronavirus pandemic. They want a 56% wage increase to help support their families amid a crippling recession and strong inflation. President Alberto Fernandez has told officers that walking out of the job was not the way to get heard. But the government has announced additional resources for Buenos Aires province, with part of it to be redirected to better conditions for officers. And finally, Moscow's famous Bolshoi Theatre has opened its ballet season with a new performance inspired by the coronavirus pandemic and self-isolation. The latest show, called 4 Characters in Search of a Plot, consists of 4 mini ballets. The idea of this performance emerged from a performance that had been cancelled due to the lockdown. One of the requirements for the dance pieces was to limit the amount of scenery and people on stage, resulting in a modern, minimalistic style. And that's your international news around the world in 5. And now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Many thanks, Simon. The Confederation of African Football, CAF, has announced that the Women's Nations Cup will hold in July of 2022. The Continental Women Championship was scheduled to hold in November this year, but was cancelled owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. Nigeria Super Falcons are the defending champions of the competition. Sebastian Vettel is looking forward to his new adventure with Racing Point from next season after Ferrari opted not to renew his existing deal beyond 2020. The 4-time champion ended 4 months of speculation about his Formula One future by signing for the current Racing Point team in a multi-year deal ahead of their big rebrand as Aston Martin. And Chelsea FC manager Frank Lampard says he is ready for the challenge of winning silverware after their spending spree in the transfer market. After going trophyless last season, Chelsea have already spent over £200 million this summer with Hakim Ziyech, Ben Chilwell, Thiago Silva, Timo Werner and Kai Havertz, amongst other notable signings. And that's a wrap in sports news.
And the main news again. For the first time in 6 years, students of the government secondary school Chibok today completed the West Africa Secondary School Certificate Examinations, WAEC. The school had remained closed following the infamous abduction of over 270 girls from the school in April 2014. Also today, President Muhammadu Buhari said the federal government's self-sufficiency plan prevented Nigeria from entering a food crisis as faced by other nations following the COVID-19 pandemic. And tech firm Microsoft today warned that the Russian group that hacked the 2016 Democratic campaign is again involved in cyber attacks, attempting to spy on the U.S. 2020 presidential election. That's it on the news at 10 tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Do have a good night.